Columbus's fourth voyage, how the Caribbeans were mistaken for the Indies. So first I just want to go over some of the islands and the regions of the fourth journey, just to kind of give you a little bit of a guide of some of the places that he went to. Some of the islands that he did name, however, aren't going to be identifiable today. Unfortunately, there's just not enough information to match them up with current islands that we know of. But we do know of a few. So one of the islands that he talked about, he named was Cuba, and he named it Isla Juana. On Isla Juana, there was a town called Havana, or so we believe the natives called it. We believe that Christopher Columbus misunderstood what the natives were calling it, and therefore he called it Avan from his own interpretation. There's also Hispaniola. Hispaniola is where Haiti and the Dominican Republic is today. Hispaniola he named Española. And on Española, there is a town called Villa de Navidad, or so he dubbed it, which is located on the Bay of Haiti. Stumbling upon the Caribbeans. Christopher Columbus was not a scholar, but he studied old travelers like Marco Polo and Pierre d'Ailly. Pierre d'Ailly was a philosopher that believed that a lot of natives are monstrosities, and he believed that they were barbarous. There's also one that he studied that I haven't listed here. His name is John Mandeville. John Mandeville, he was a traveler. He actually claimed that he had found dog-faced people and people with one eye or one foot on his journeys. This was, of course, falsified information, but at the time they didn't know that that was false. And so a lot of people were expecting that he was going to find people like that, people that were really terrible or malformed in some way or another. And many people, including Columbus, assumed that these ancient writers had more experience and were much wiser than they were. So this kind of explains why Columbus believed that he hadn't found a new continent or new islands that hadn't been discovered yet entirely. Christopher Columbus saw the strange things that he had never seen before and just believed that, you know, this was somewhere in China, in the Indies, and that he didn't have names for what they were. Something that was quoted in the Smithsonian magazine was that he felt shamed, I suppose, that he didn't recognize like these beautiful things that he was seeing, and he felt lacking in like knowledge. So on to Hispaniola. Española is what he called Hispaniola. It was very lush and green, so he named it after the Spanish island Castile. When Christopher Columbus came to the Caribbean, he found that there was an abundance of gold. Columbus says that many of the rivers are teeming with gold and that there are many mines filled with precious metals. He also quotes in this section of the Norton Anthology, so it was found that a soldier for a strap received gold to the weight of 2.5 castellanos and others much more for other things which were worth much less. So the people that he's talking about are the Arawak tribe. The Arawak tribe is the kind of tribe that doesn't really believe in possessing things. They don't have many possessions, and they just kind of like live off of the land and have a very laid-back style of living. So to them, what was precious is gold. And to these people that they were encountering, you know, of course, they don't recognize, you know, the things that they have, and they don't know its worth. So those small things were good things to them. And probably because, as Christopher Columbus said, they were very good-natured people. They probably just believed that they had the same intentions as they did, that they were just giving them things because they were new and they had never seen them before. You know, they were assuming that they were just as giving as they were, not that they were taking advantage of them. So on to the Arawak way of life. In all the island, they have very many canoes, like rowing fustas, some larger, some smaller, and some are larger than a fusta of 18 benches. So the Arawak tribe and many of the other tribes in the Caribbean rely on boats to navigate and to reach other islands. And as I mentioned before, Columbus describes them as being very serviceable people and good-natured. So the Caribs are another tribe that Columbus does encounter. The Caribs were very different from the Arawaks. The Caribs are described in the Smithsonian magazine as being much more industrious than the Arawaks were. Columbus describes the Caribs of Quarus Island, is what he called it, as very fierce and cannibalistic, and they used poisonous arrows to ward off invaders. So they weren't as friendly whenever the colonists came to their island. And this is different than the Arawaks entirely. The Caribs used weapons. The Arawaks had them, but didn't really use them. And of course, they weren't as friendly as the Arawaks were. Christianity and slavery. Christianity was very important during colonization. Slavery was an ancient instrument of civilization, and in the 15th century it had been revived as a way to deal with barbarians who refused to accept Christianity and the role of civilized government. Christopher Columbus believed, he quotes the tribesmen of the Arawak tribe as saying, come to see the people from heaven." He viewed himself almost as in the image of Christ, as somebody who is spreading this wondrous and glorious faith, and he believed that these people somehow maybe knew that, and a lot of the belief was that, he was spreading a good thing, civilization, Christianity, and he had a lot to offer. So that was like part of the colonization aspect, and why slavery was something that was almost expected from the Arawaks, because he is doing this great thing and giving them, a civilized way of living. He views what he had to offer as something that they would want. Just a little fun fact, so Columbus wasn't actually the first person to find America. And this, of course, was found much later on, when anthropology and excavation became much more important and the technology for it developed. But we found that Leif Erikson, a Viking, was actually the first person to discover America, and he did it 300 or 3,000 years before Columbus actually stumbled upon the Caribbeans. And then these are my citations. Thank you for listening.